Hey folks, Malforian here, and I'm back with the final part of the latest dev diary 147 for Crusader Kings 3. This is covering a few things. It starts with a discussion about which features and game content should be free versus paid for, with some interesting news at the end, and then we do get a little bit of a sneak preview of some of the features coming in the Road to Power DLC. If you haven't already seen, I've done 2 videos on this dev diary already. It was that big. The game director really given us a lot of information today. I've already covered some reworks on Legends and Plagues and some other content that's getting reworks as well. And then also the patch notes for the patch that is coming free next week, which has got quite a few balance changes in there as well. But we're just going to get straight into this one, and it is the philosophy of free. I'm not going to read all this. It is a bit of a wall of text, but it is very interesting actually getting a view from the game director about DLC that they release and how their philosophy has maybe changed a little bit. The first part really reaffirming their belief that game systems shouldn't be part of the paid DLC, and saying that, especially in Crusader Kings 2, they really went too far with kind of dividing the player base, having certain features that were only in certain DLC, and that caused them a lot of problems later on when they were trying to make content. And then they'd have to remember some people will have this system, other people won't have this system. They also ended up making systems that kind of overlap with each other again, because they wouldn't know for sure people would have all the important systems if they hadn't bought all the DLC. And I think this has been one of the major wins of Crusader Kings 3, and we've seen it as well in Victoria and hopefully in EU5, where all the major systems are part of the base game and then are part of the free patches, and then the DLC is like extra stuff built onto that, kind of like the cherry on top, as people say, of that content, that if you pay money to help support the game, you do get extra stuff, which is fair. Everyone loves to complain about DLC and its price, but at the end of the day, if it didn't sell, they didn't make it, there'll be no more content for this game. They just move on to something else. And we all want to play this game for a long time, or I think many of us do anyway. And as I say, a lot of this is just about that. But also they do call out modders, saying how much of a fantastic job they do, giving us content for free. Like, you can donate to modders, but most of us can just go on the Steam store and download a mod and really enjoy it. And it kind of extends the lifetime of the game itself. And the game director fantastically just calling it out and saying, awesome work by modders, but also saying that they don't want to rely on modders to make the game better. They're saying there should be game features and events and things that you can enjoy that you don't need to use mods for. And you are going to see that in one of the features they talk about later. It does copy a little bit from one of the more popular mods recently that has been really, really fun to play with. And then, as I say, at the end of this section, they do talk about how there is no fixed ratio between if a DLC's content is going to be part of the paid DLC or part of the free patch. But on that note, the next DLC, Roads to Power, will have plenty of free systems, and that will be more than what this dev diary covers. This is just an initial look at some of them, but it will lean more towards paid features, more so than Legends of the Dead did. So that's going to be interesting to see exactly how much the content here is going to be part of the paid DLC. If I had to hazard a guess, there is the Byzantine rework. I imagine most of that is going to be free as part of the free patch. I wonder if, like, the mana system that we're going to look into, I wonder if that's going to be part of the paid DLC. I imagine it would be, but I think like new succession types, etc., that's all going to be part of the free DLC. And then the only one that has me worried is the unlanded character gameplay. Would they fully lock that behind DLC? I'm not too sure. I could actually see it going that way, unfortunately, because so much, I think, of how it's going to work is kind of like lumped together. I don't know how they could split it out so that it would be part of the base game and then put additional stuff into the paid DLC. I don't know really how that would work, but again, that kind of goes against their philosophy of having major game systems be part of the base game and the free patches. So I'm not sure. Let me know what you think. How could they split it out? I suppose they could just have a bunch of events and activities and things like that that you could do from the DLC, but the base game, there's enough for you to do that you can still get enjoyment out of it. And then, of course, mods could add on to that to kind of enhance that as well. Maybe that is what they do. Yeah, that's probably what's going to happen. They'll probably have that kind of like base set of things. You can do tournaments, feasts, you can go on adventures and things. But outside of that, the major kind of content around being a landless character is going to be behind the DLC. That would be my guess. We will see before too long, to be honest. Next, they're going to talk about a challenging game, a thing that a lot of people talk about, especially on Reddit, on the forums and things. Is Crusader Kings 3 a hard game to play? And how can they make it more interesting and more difficult for you to play as well? And I think many people would agree with this. CK3, in truth, is not a particularly hard game once you've mastered it. To be honest, that's true about all grand strategy games. The one thing I like about Crusader Kings and a lot of Paradox games, though, is that even if you know how to play it, there's always things that kind of throw you off, always little adventures you can go on, more so than Civilization. I always say this, that I used to play a lot of Civilization 5, 6, pretty much all of them, but once I started playing Paradox games, I never really went back to Civilization. Once you know how to play that game, you can always win, because you always can play, not like perfectly, but in a way that you know you're going to pretty much win by the end of it, even if you play on the harder difficulties. Whereas Crusader Kings, yeah, if you play really well, you are pretty much always going to win, but it's kind of like a different win. It depends really on what you've set yourself to do, and I don't know, I think it's just more replayable, even if it's not really hard to play, as they do agree that is the case. Let me know again what you think, though, in the comments down below. They do continue to say, though, they don't want CK3 to be too easy, or that systems that it has become too trivial to overcome, because that then does affect the stories that you can tell. If everything's just bland and easy, you can't really kind of role play out those stories, even if you're not having that much of a difficult time playing it. And he's going to go into a little bit of his philosophy here of how the difficulty in CK3 should be for players. Firstly, he's not a fan of traditional hard difficulties, where the AI just get a bunch of resources and bonuses. Again, if we think of Civilization, they just get more things to begin with. They get easier time building things. They can build things faster, and it kind of like cheats to make them as good as a player. Well, not even really as good as a player, but those advantages kind of counteract how good you can be at playing it, and they don't want to go down that kind of pitfall in Crusader Kings and just buff AIs to make them good. They want to steer away from that a little bit, and alternatively, they don't want to just nerf players to make them feel artificially bad at the game and have them kind of overcome obstacles that aren't real. They're kind of like artificial barriers they put up. They don't want to do that. They don't want to buff the AI, and they don't want to nerf players. It's not good either way. What they would rather do is have difficulty that is immersive and then you opt into. It shouldn't get in the way of telling your stories up to a certain degree by the AI only doing objectively good things such as stacking wars, spamming murder schemes, etc. It should help you create stories of triumph or stories of overcoming hardship. The AI is there to immerse you in the game and to provide you with an enjoyable challenge. Unlike the player, the AI never has a game over, and therefore should focus on immersion over pure survival. Although they should not feel overly suicidal, that's not immersive either. And all of this, I would super agree with. A lot of people on the forums and Reddit are always talking about, like, the AI never attacks me, it's boring. They could easily just give them a bonus where they could just attack you, and you would have no defense against it, and you lost, and then people would complain about that. Funnily enough, they are going to get into a Conqueror system later in this dev diary that works a little bit like that. It looks really scary, but it does look like it's going to be super interesting if it does happen to you, and we'll get into that shortly. And then as he goes on to say, they want the AI to play in an immersive way where they don't always take the optimal decisions. They try to be wary of changing the overarching difficulty of the game. Making the game harder overall will always hit the AI harder than the player, as the player, you know, can learn from experiences, can adapt to situations easier than the AI can. There are systems that are easier to change than others to introduce more challenge to the player without inadvertently making the game harder for the AI. For example, the AI will always marry for alliances or prestige, never for genetics, so they will never play the genetics game like a player will. That kind of gives the player an advantage because you can build up your genetic traits and things like that to give you that little bit of an advantage. This means that if they were to make it more of a challenge to reinforce good genetic traits, which is on the radar but not for roads to power, it would hardly harm the AI at all. So this is a way they could kind of curtail the power of the player by making that kind of like genetics minigame harder to do. I kind of agree that it should be harder to do. It is on their radar, so I think we will see some change to the system. I think it is a little bit too easy to stack genetic traits. Pretty much if you have two people with the same trait, it's pretty likely that your heir will get it. In most cases, pretty definite that they will do. So I think randomizing that a little bit would be good, because if you're a genius and your wife's a genius, it doesn't necessarily mean your child's going to be a genius as well. So I think they should mix this up a little bit, and it does sound like in the future, after the next DLC, potentially, we will see a rebalance of that, which I'm all in favor for. And then he does go on to say, this is obviously not true for all systems. They could change something in like traditions or how warfare works, and it wouldn't be so kind of cut and dry that a change wouldn't affect the player and it would affect the AI. But I think the Alliance example is a really good example, actually, about how they kind of separate the player from the AI and how they could balance that a little bit fairer towards the AI in a way to make the player slightly worse if the genetics game wasn't so powerful. And we could discuss that when that change does come, if it ever does in the future. And then difficulty comes in different flavors. One of the flavors is to optimize resources to overcome challenges. This is where you use gold, prestige, land, vassals to overcome your rivals and neighbours. Very common in all grand strategy games. But the problem with this is that the lack of mid to late game AI challenges makes the difficulty peter out quickly after you formed a decently sized realm. I would generally agree with this. I do think we need more mechanics that either knock you down from your size or, you know, unlanded gameplay. You could willingly give up your land or something to kind of spice it up a little bit, but I think this is a hard one to balance. Once you get a decent sized realm, especially once you get like primogenitor, the game is, let's be honest, pretty easy. It's quite hard to actually get like dethroned and for you to encounter real hardship if you play moderately well. I don't envy them, to be honest, on how they can make this improvements in the future. Another flavor of difficulty to overcome is specific challenges where the rules you play are different and not controlled by you. This is when you guide a blind 4-year-old through a viper's nest of rivals in order to reach adulthood and subsequently thrive. This is more of a unique CK3 thing because of how the families and dynasties and pretty much the gameplay of CK3. It's very different to a lot of map painters because it's not a map painter. As a famous YouTuber once said, it is a role-playing game disguised as a map painting one. But then the problem is that you have a lot of control over education, inheritance, and that you're restricted to a direct line of inheritance, which makes it so you're challenged less often, which we were just discussing actually, about how once you get primogenitor, the game gets even easier. A lot of people want primogenitor earlier. I actually don't, because as annoying as it is to work around, it's just so easy once you unlock primogenitor. It kind of makes the game easy mode. So I actually like that early game difficulty by not having it, and I think they kind of agree a little bit here as well, which is what we're going to get onto later on. There's another cool succession feature coming down the line. Both of these are connected to player fantasies that are very common to have when playing CK3, and both are difficulties that they want to improve. And then the two features they're going to show off kind of show that fact that they're trying to improve these. They work continuously to improve general difficulty in their systems, but sometimes they do decide to do things that are larger in scope, such as these. And this is what I've been talking about all the way through these videos, the features they're going to talk about. First one is Conquerors, and this looks awesome. I really like this. It is kind of, I guess, like a little bit immersion breaking in a way, but I actually think this is going to bring up some really cool stories. So let's just get into it. As he was saying before, he doesn't like having the AI cheat, where they just get weird buffs to make them better, but he does enjoy having certain characters stand out from the rest. When certain rulers, either because of historical reasons or in-game suitability, are granted special bonuses and a new way of interacting with the world. Think of Heistine, he starts with all those bonus troops, and everyone kind of loves playing as him or kind of seeing what adventures he gets up to. That is someone that is artificially boosted. There's many others as well. There's one in Sri Lanka, and there's a few others as well that start with a lot of extra troops and things, and, you know, it's kind of interesting seeing what they get up to, or if you just want a fun campaign starting as them and seeing what you can do, and that is going to tie into this feature that is coming. The Middle Ages are full of these conquerors who forged large empires that later fell, like the Ghaznavids, the Ayyubids, etc. And he wants to bring something like this to Crusader Kings, dynamic challenges controlled in detail by game rules, who can rival players in efficiency whilst being immersive and flavorful. And this is our first screenshot of a little bit of how the system's going to work. So frequency of conquerors. Every 5 years, there is a small chance for independent rulers with certain traits and personalities to become conquerors. And we're going to get into exactly what that means. It looks like you could change this to be more often, less often, turn it off, etc. Conquerors bonuses. Conquerors gain the Conqueror trait, and they're going to talk about that later as well. And then inheritance. The Conqueror's personality and bonuses will be inherited by all their heirs that end up as independent rulers on succession. If this is turned on by default, it's going to make some really weird campaigns. I'm really looking forward to this. Again, though, you're going to be able to turn this off and all of that good stuff, so there's a lot of control here. But what are Conquerors? Let's get into it, because you are going to be scared by them. Conquerors switch over to a hyper-aggressive version of the AI, which is much faster at declaring wars, can declare multiple wars at once, and invest all their resources into warfare, men-at-arms, and means in which to declare more and better wars. Basically, they're just always doing warfare, and they want to do more warfare. They're corn, they're blood for the blood god. They're just always wanting to be fighting and having a good time. They will also switch the objectively best lifestyle focuses, use schemes in a very realpolitik way, and a bunch of other changes to really focus this AI into doing warfare and just going crazy on the map. Think of it, I guess, as like a mini Mongol kind of invasion, but it can happen anywhere in the map, as these Conqueror characters are created under certain circumstances. And as you can see, Conqueror, this is an economical archetype. The Conqueror wants to expand their realm through war at any cost. They will invest all gold into the war chest or buy men-at-arms. They tend to declare more wars than usual, and are rather untrusty allies, so they will kind of break alliance with you, so you can't ally to them and kind of ignore them. They will forsake most frivolous pleasures in life, such as hosting or going to activities and sponsoring inspirations, to save gold for crushing their enemies. They will only use activities to gain prestige and piety to go to war. Any non-cautious ruler has the potential to become a conqueror, but normally there are no more than a handful of rulers worldwide with this archetype. So you're not going to see this all the time, even if you leave it on the default rules. These are going to be very rare. They're not just going to be springing up all the time, conquering land all over the place. They're going to be pretty rare to see. I'd say in a full game, you'll probably see a couple of them maybe, but of course they can get killed off as normal, so they're not all going to be super successful. You'll see them kind of spring up. Think of like if you stick like a 100 stat man in a game and then just watch what he gets up to. It's going to be a little bit like that, but more kind of specialized and a lot more interesting. So that is what the archetype looks like in game, similar to other ones in there. And by default, they will get this Conqueror trait, which provides a host of powerful boons, which they're going to look into in a second, making them have a much easier time at fielding a large army and keeping their realm stable. If you prefer not to give the AI any handicap, you can turn this off as well in the game rules. He avoided certain types of bonuses, such as making their troops fight better, or having them have an artificially high advantage in combat, because such bonuses can feel unfair. That is good. That is a fine line to kind of tread, and I'm glad they didn't go over that line. I think if they just had better troops for no reason but them being a conqueror, I think that would be unfair, and just kind of getting random dice rolls being better, again, doesn't feel right. But all these bonuses that kind of work into the game mechanics already, yes, they're pretty obscene. You'll see that in a second in a screenshot, but they kind of fit in still, I think, with Crusader Kings. If they just randomly buffed units, I think that is going too far. So yeah, I'm glad they kind of cut it off at that point. So instead, they opted for areas where the player often has an advantage: economy, realm stability. Again, areas that as a player, you generally do better than the AI. And here is the famed trait. Look how good it is. Look how scary this is. +5 tax a month. Men-at-Arms maintenance minus 75%, title creation cost minus 75%, hostile scheme speed plus 25, legitimacy 5 a month, unlocks the forced vassalization Casus Belli, they don't need to unlock it, and then the really scary ones, removes prestige and piety costs from Casus Belli, so wars are free for them to initiate, and then also outside of that, armies will flock to their banners, so it looks like they just get a bunch of units for free. Vassals will fall in line, so I guess they have no rebellions or very limited, and claimants will flock to their court. So outside of the forced vassalization Casus Belli, they're also going to be able to push claims for people that are in their court. So again, just think of the combinations here. There's going to be some really scary wars going on, especially if you're close to it. If you're not, it's just going to be fun to watch. And the kind of byline there is, the world lies before me, ripe for the taking. It will be mine. So we're going to have little Alexanders running around the map, getting up to chaos, which is just going to be great. But as we saw before, you can just turn this off, limit it. If you don't like how this looks, you can just turn it off and ignore it, and it was never added if you think of it that way. But of course, some people, they want a little bit more of a challenge, and they've got you covered as well. So there is a truly unfair challenge you can set with a game rule set to extreme, where they'll get additional Scourge of God modifiers. This is very not recommended for the normal player. I guess if you're min-maxing or just want a bit of fun, you could turn this on. And here it is, the Scourge of the Gods. I am the punishment of God. If you have not committed great sins, God would not have sent a punishment like me upon you. This sounds awesome. Unlocks unlimited invasion Casus Belli, so they can invade everyone repeatedly, which is crazy. Godlike booster health, siege phase time minus 50%, plus 75 scheme chance, army moves 25% faster, knights have 25 bonus, 25. Army siege weapon effectiveness plus 100%, men-at-arms siege progress plus 1, control growth 5 a month, and plague resistance plus 50. This is kind of intentionally tipping over to that unfair realm, but I actually like they're adding this. It would be cool to turn this on and just see what happens in a campaign. They could have easily not done this. As they've said, this is really just for if you want a crazy campaign and kind of see what happens, or really give yourself a challenge. So this is an option. You will have to intentionally turn this on. And again, most of us aren't gonna, but it would be fun to see how it plays out. With the default game rules, rulers around the world have a very, very small chance to become conquerors. The likelihood goes up the more suitable they are based on traits, government, available Casus Belli. A global pacing mechanic makes sure there aren't too many of these characters worldwide. Oh, so even if there are available people, it's not going to let like 5 of them spawn at once and see what happens. They will mostly appear in areas where you'd expect large upheavals in regional power structures, but they are never truly guaranteed. They could appear everywhere, they're just weighted to go in certain places. You can also control all of this via game rules, as we've already seen above. Everything good has to come to an end, and if they are defeated repeatedly in wars, lose all of their prestige or similar, they will stop being conquerors and lose all their bonuses. Oh, so you don't even have to kill them. You can basically just beat the conqueror out of them, and they revert back to normal characters. But if an AI is cautious, in their other words, a craven coward, they will also stop being a conqueror. This creates a dynamic ebb and flow of the challenge. Also, I guess it's like a timer. If they're not at war, a timer pretty much starts. And if they don't declare a war, they lose it anyway, which is cool. Kind of thematically matches the kind of experience that they're going for. And then they've got a screenshot here of how it's affected the Indian subcontinent with the two conquerors here, splitting most of India between them. This feature will help the mid to late game feel less stale when you forge the Grand Realm, and this will be coming with Roads to Power. It doesn't mention whether this is free or part of the paid. I would imagine this is going to be free. I could see it being part of the paid. Let me know what you think in the comments down below. It's kind of like a weird off system, so maybe it will be paid, but I'm not too sure. It could go either way, to be honest. I'm super hyped for this. It's going to be interesting to play through and see what happens with these Conqueror characters. And, you know, historically, this kind of thing did happen, so it's not too outlandish, I don't think, for CK3. And then the second thing they're going to talk about here is choosing a new destiny. This looks really cool. This is giving you a different way to play when succession happens. There's a fantastic mod called Inheritance, where when you die, it randomly rolls a character from your dynasty and you play as them instead of your direct heir. And this is a little bit like that, but gives you a lot more control on how that works. And they start here by saying, those of you that followed what they did at the Black Forge Jam, I'll be honest, I have no idea what they're talking about. I probably should, being a content creator for Crusader Kings, but I actually don't know what they're talking about here. But with this feature, when you die, you now have the opportunity to select one of 3 carefully selected dynasty members, and there is a screenshot showing this off later on. These picks are chosen based on an interest score, where various subjective things are chosen to make a character more or less interesting. But they do say here, feel free in the comments to this dev diary, which I will leave in the description down below, where you can give suggestions on what you consider interesting, such as combinations of traits or skills. I guess maybe how big their army is, how much land they've got, etc. Having rare trait or being in a peculiar situation, such as being one of the only dynasty members of a certain faith. So if one of your dynasty members is a Satru and everyone else is Catholic, it would potentially bring up that a Satru character and say, do you want to play as this guy because he's so weird compared to everyone else? And then this will kind of weight towards characters and it will give you the 3 more interesting ones that it thinks. And as you can see in this screenshot here, you have died. They're giving this screen a bit of a rework here, and you'll see at the bottom, continue as the petty king. This is what we have at the moment. But then there's a new option, choose a new destiny, select your destiny, play as another character of your destiny that is not your heir, and it's going to be one of these 3 characters that it's going to choose. And what is the point of this feature? Well, it gives you the opportunity to take on new challenges. Perhaps you have an awfully interesting one-eyed albino uncle who's a count of a foreign faith and in a distant realm. Now you have the opportunity to change the course of your game and experience these much rarer situations that don't exist when you start the game within your bookmarks. When you feel accomplished and finished with what you are doing, you can treat this almost as a new game plus within the same session, which is a good way to think about it, to be honest. If you have kind of finished your campaign, what you were kind of aiming to do, when you die, a lot of people just stop, you know, and restart as a different character or whatever. But with this, you can kind of continue your game in like a refresh of it, but you're playing in the same world that you were before, but in a totally different situation. And as you can see in this next screenshot, choose a new destiny. You can play as King Alfonso VI, your brother. And why would you do this? He is of an underrepresented culture, knows many secrets, and holds an important claim. He is very hard to play. The next character, King Garcia, he is a ruler in foreign lands. His capital is a holy site, and he holds important claims. This would be very hard to play. I'm not sure exactly how the difficulty is going to work. We will see that in the future. And then Garcia de Aragon, he's your cousin. He's the one that's not very important at the moment. He's more skillful than the other heir. He holds important claims, and he also has experience as a wise man. And now, interestingly, it's got this kind of like helmet icon next to him. So the other 2 are kings, and you can just take over as that character and play as those kings and have a good time down there in Iberia. Or the last guy, I wonder if this means he's an unlanded character, because he's just got the helmet, which I wonder if that means he's like in a mercenary band, or he's up to something else, but he doesn't hold land. And this would be a cool way to kind of bring in unlanded gameplay in games where you already landed as a certain character. It would be really good for integrating that into the game and not always having to start as an unlanded character. You can give up your throne when you die. Instead of playing as your heir, you can just go and play as some relative that you have that is maybe, you know, going on crusade on his own. He's not landed. He's having a good time. He's trying to gain some land somewhere else. And then you could end up playing in the Holy Lands or somewhere like that. And I think that would be really, really cool for bringing the system into more campaigns and not always having to think at the beginning of a campaign, yeah, I definitely want to play as an unlanded character because I've got to choose it at the beginning. This way you can integrate it into your campaigns later and just imagine the stories that you could have. And then it would also be interesting watching the character you should have played as and seeing what they get up to. And then maybe if you die quick enough, you actually go back and play as him. There's a weird way how this could work. I think this is one of the more interesting things they've thought about recently and how you can do this and kind of spice up the game and you're not kind of just bored and playing out things later on. So we will see a lot more information about this when it is actually closer to release. As they say here, there are no inherent bonuses associated with making the switch, which is good, I think. They're actually in two minds as to whether there should be. I don't think they should. I think it's cool just playing as a normal character in these different situations. I don't think they should really get given bonuses to make it like more interesting to play as them, because the whole point is you're playing them because they're in a weird situation. But we'll see. I'm sure they'll give some kind of game rule to it if they do decide that. They have considered adding a small renown boon to choosing to switch, perhaps based on difficulty. Again, he welcomes feedback on what you think about this. The renown thing, that could work, but it almost goes against renown, the fact that you're not playing as like a good character of that dynasty. You're actually playing as a bad one. So I kind of see what they're going for, but I don't know. I kind of don't agree with it. I think it should just be no bonus, and then you just have it and kind of see how that plays out. I guess maybe if you do really well as that character, it could be interesting to maybe get a bonus during his lifetime, but I don't think an initial bonus on that character makes much sense. And then I lied. There's actually 3 things they're going to talk about here. This one probably the most interesting for most of you. We're getting confirmation of the next start date that we're going to be getting, and that is on the road to power. And they've seen a lot of discussions recently about how adventurers will play, and they want to give a brief overview of how they're designing them to kind of like curtail our wilder dreams. As they said at the very beginning of this dev diary, in the first video I did in this series, they believe that in the dev diaries for Legends of the Dead, they kind of didn't go into enough detail on how systems worked. Let us kind of go off in our own imagination on how something would work. And then that ultimately caused issues when we actually got our hands on it. And I think they're trying to curtail that a little bit here as well. Kind of put us in our place as to what a feature is and isn't going to be. So playing as an average adventurer will be a 0 to hero experience, a completely separate experience from how you play a landed character, which is awesome, where you have to work your way up in the world. You will travel a lot, accumulate resources to improve your standing. It won't be easy to gain land depending on the goals you have set for yourself. Gaining a small plot of land naturally will not be as difficult as doing something epic like invading a kingdom, except if you're an adventurer with a special legitimate purpose, which is our first hint there as to how some of this is going to work, in which case it's intended that you can amass a large army and lots of support quickly. This will be very rare though, so we are going to get these kind of versions of unlanded characters by the sounds of it. But it will definitely be possible to play as a multi-generational adventurer should you want. So it's not just going to be one character and then you have to be landed. It looks like you can be unlanded for multiple characters and build towards something better, which is cool. And then before they end this dev diary, as I say, this has been 3 videos. There's probably like an hour and a half, nearly 2 hours worth of video I've done here, which is pretty crazy for dev diary coverage. They want to leave us with some screenshots on the upcoming features of Roads to Power and its accompanying update. Firstly, they've already hinted towards this, but the free update will introduce a new 1178 start date along with 2 bookmarks, one focusing on the Byzantine Empire and its surrounding, the Call of the Empire. 1178 provides a more built-up starting situation than 867 and 1066, which I think a lot of people are looking for, and also gives them access to a whole new host of new historical characters and dynasties to play as, such as Salad in Egypt, or the Plantagenets in England. Not to mention that the centerpiece realm of Roads to Power, Byzantium, is in a challenging situation with the Sultanate of Rum on its doorstep. So a lot of cool stories that can be told in this time frame. But this does confirm that the new start date does come as part of the free update. I think that was pretty obvious. I don't think they would lock a start date behind a DLC with what they've been talking about already, but this does confirm that it won't be the case. And as you can see, this is how one of the bookmarks looks. So we've got Princess Tamar up there having a good time. And then we've got a few characters around the Byzantine Empire and then also the Seljuks as well. I think pretty standard characters for this area. We haven't seen Swords of Faith, which is the other bookmark yet. We will get more information about that in the future. So this is the Call of Empire bookmark that we can see. Can't wait for this to come. And then secondly, they also want to show off a screenshot of how the estate feature for noble families inside the Byzantines will work. Although this will also be available for other administrative empires, which is interesting. I thought this was only going to be part of the Byzantines, but it looks like other admin empires can also gain access to this, which is cool. I wonder if that's going to be the free DLC where you can use this as a general feature in admin empires. But if you play inside the Byzantines, you'll get a bunch of extra features and content around this system specialized to that area. I wouldn't be surprised if that's how it works. As you can see from the screenshot, which I'll put up on the screen, the estate has a location on the map where it can be accessed, in this case Athens, and a whole host of building upgrade options, ranging from the mansion itself, external buildings like watchtowers, storehouses, and internal upgrades such as granaries. There is even branching upgrades where you get to choose which one you want the most. The estate is managed by the house head, and there's one per family, so these aren't going to be all over the place, but they are going to be dotted around the empire, depending on the houses that you have in there. If you have a limited amount of houses, you're going to get less of these. And this UI is quite nice. I did see a comment actually online saying, why is the art different to Tours and Tournaments art? I kind of agree with that. I almost feel like the Tours and Tournament art should match this. This looks way more like medieval kind of art style, and it would be cool actually if they went back to Tours and Tournaments and changed that UI to kind of match this. It is a bit jarring that the art style is so different. It's not that bad. To be honest, most people aren't even going to notice or really care, but I did kind of agree with that comment that the art style is weird that it's so different between these two systems, but like I say, it's not the end of the world. But the art looks awesome here. I guess it changes as well depending on how big you build these buildings. As you can see, they've got a level 3 mansion, a level 2 barracks, a level 2 storehouse, and a level 2 watchtower. And then I imagine behind the storehouse UI here, there's some other buildings as well. Looking at how the art works in the background, it looks like there's more in there. And then a rough idea of what these are going to do as well. So the granary, for example, increases your supply capacity and gives you manipulate the grain market decision, which will be interesting to see exactly what that does. Because that sounds like prices, but that's obviously not coming to the game. But maybe in a future update with trade and things like that, it will do. Again, we'll see in the future. But with that, that is our look at some features coming to Road to Power, and also the breakdown earlier about what they're thinking about bringing to the game, etc. as well. And then as they mentioned earlier in the dev diary, they are committed to bringing more detailed dev diaries for Road to Power. So yes, in the future, you've got to look forward to more hour-long videos by me on dev diaries and features. I'll try to cut them down maybe in the future, but I just enjoy talking about the game so much. They do kind of get away from me sometimes. And while there has been more teaser-like sections in this dev diary, that will not be the norm going forwards. There should be no room for misinterpreting what they're making or how it will work. Again, going back to that earlier conversation they had about thinking that players got confused about how systems were going to work due to the dev diaries. As I said in that video, I don't actually agree with that. I think players knew what was coming. Maybe it didn't do everything they thought it was going to, but I think players got the rough idea of how legends were going to work. I don't think it was that confusing, but that's what they believe. To be honest, if it means we get more detailed dev diaries, I'm not going to complain. That's awesome for us. It gives me great videos to make, and it gets us talking in the comments and just seeing really what's coming to the game a little bit earlier maybe, and giving feedback as well. That would be a cool thing, I suppose. If they do these dev diaries early enough, like they have been doing with EU5, maybe we can give some feedback that little bit earlier and kind of change the path of the expansion if we don't like where it's going. But we'll see much more about that in the future. Hopefully we do get some dev diaries coming up soon about this expansion. I would think maybe late June, July is when we're probably going to get the dev diaries started. We don't know when this DLC is coming. I would agree with most people though, probably August, September is a likely outcome, because then like January, February is when the next DLC will come out after that. I think that kind of spaces it out quite well. We will find out probably before too long anyway. But on that note, I'm not going to keep you any longer. Hit that like button if you've enjoyed today's video. Subscribe if you are new here. This has been my coverage of Dev Diary 147, Words from the Game Director. This has been fantastic to cover. I think most of the changes here I'm on board for. And from what I've seen online, a lot of players are happy about this and kind of surprised they've gone into this much detail about their kind of processes that they're improving, and showing that they are going to improve old content and new content is going to be different as well. But I'll leave you there, and I'll see you in the next one.